topics. 5, 4, 3, 2.
I'm Matthew Bach on behalf of the Andover Education Association. The discussion is in regards to special education at the high school. Recently, the principal, Dr. Thomas Sharkey, informed the special education department that 8 of their 19 faculty members would be eliminated next year, replaced by 11 special ed assistants, and that the co-teaching model of special education and non-special education teachers would be eliminated for next year. This model is something that attends to the diverse special needs of students in regular ed inclusion classrooms to ensure that differentiated learning occurs, and also attends to these needs outside of the classroom in after-school situations and in other extracurricular support mechanisms. The first thing we're going to do is have a testimonial from a foreign language teacher, Dr. Bill Colby, who has worked with the special education department or special education teachers in his classes before. Dr. Colby.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bach. In light of the proposed cuts to the SPED department, I felt compelled to come down here and give a testimonial on behalf of a wonderful SPED professional and human being, Ms. Leslie Ganley. A number of years ago, I had a special needs student in my class with autism, and Ms. Ganley's charge was to accompany the student, monitor the student, but most importantly, to inspire the student. And her presence there in the class enabled the student to perform all the tasks and to comply with all the requirements of the class, leading up to the final project in addition. But what was really wonderful was the fact that the special talents of the student, his ability to calculate among different calendars and make transitions between days of the week and specific dates on the calendar, was so mind-boggling, and to have the students in the class be able to experience that was just awesome in highlighting potentials of these special students, these specially gifted students. But more than just this particular charge of the one student, Ms. Ganley made it a point to go throughout the entire class and supervise many of my students who had needs in the class. And it made for such a productive, harmonious, and collaborative environment. And I think what is being proposed may be saving something on the economic side of the capital formula, but in terms of humanistic capital, it will be devastating to our school to follow with this proposal. So listen up, people. Let's not follow through with this disastrous move with respect to SPED here at the high school. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Colby. When we come back, we're going to hear from some of the members of the special education department at the high school in regards to this proposal and what it's going to mean to student life in general. I'm joined now by 3 of my colleagues at Andover High School: Leslie Ganley, special education teacher; Brian Parker, regular education teacher in the social studies department, but also formerly a special education teacher; and Renee Drucke, special education teacher. The cuts to the special education department, how is that going to affect daily life of the students at Andover High School? And we'll start with you, Renee.
Sure. I think one of the things that to keep in mind when the cuts do become a reality is the fact that the student-teacher ratios will no longer be what they currently are in a co-teaching model. Because with 2 teachers and 28 kids, let's say, which is the top side of our contractual agreement, that's roughly 14 students for 1 teacher. That's a great ratio. When we take the special ed teacher out of the room, now we're back to 28 kids for 1 classroom teacher. So that's one difference.
And that's, again, a mixed inclusionary
Correct.
setting.
Correct.
Mr. Parker.
A kind of the same situation. I'm in a team teaching situation with Mr. Hecht, another special education teacher, and he is invaluable in my room. We have 29 kids in the classes that he's co-taught with me, and I call him my color man. He fills in information. He is an equal teacher to me. It's not an aide in the classroom. It's another teacher in the class. And his information, his help to me is invaluable. He imparts as much knowledge to the kids as I do, and the kids thrive in that classroom. If that is removed, I see great difficulty with some of those kids in the class. He looks at tests, he looks at grading, he speaks to kids, he takes kids extra time, not necessarily during the class, but after class, and really helps out a whole lot in making sure those kids have that same base knowledge that any other kid in the class has. Because I have a background in special education as well, for whatever reason, it seems that I typically get a lot of kids on IEPs in my classroom. So that is more difficult for me when you have 29 kids in the class. So with Mr. Hecht being in the class as well, it's makes a huge difference for those kids.
Ms. Scanley.
Well, two things come to mind. The first from my experience of last semester where I was co-teaching in 3 different English classes. The amount of writing that we were able to assign was much greater because there were 2 teachers in the classroom. We could assign more essays, longer essays, do more writing on tests, and we would share in the correction of that, as well as meeting with students as they were writing and after if they wanted to work on revision. So I think the quality of student writing was really improved, and that was for students on IEPs and students not on IEPs in that classroom. The other thing is, that we had a number of students who are emotionally fragile, that have emotional and psychiatric issues or social or family issues going on, and some were even out for extended periods from the class. And by having 2 teachers in the classroom, one of us, and often I would be the one in that situation, could work individually with the student to get them back up to speed, work outside of the classroom, as Mr. Parker's saying, try to make it seamless and make sure everybody succeeded and completed the course and passed the course and could move forward towards earning an Andover High diploma.
I worked in a situation of co-teaching with Melvin Berger in social studies, freshman social studies, for a couple of years, and all the things that you mentioned were essential really to the success of the class. And it wasn't, what strikes me is it's not just a case of supporting the special education students, but Mr. Berger also brought a lot of talent, a lot of introspection, and astute analysis of the material that we went over, and it made me see the material in a different way. It improved my teaching ability. I'd like to think it did. Well, let's talk about cost. This has obviously been marketed as a cost saving situation, removing these teachers from the department. And we recently spoke to 2 candidates for a school committee. There was an election last week, Dennis Ford and Donald Gottfried. And Mr. Ford concentrated on the cost of outplacing special ed students. How is this type of thing going to affect that situation of outplacing students? Ms. Druke.
Sure. I think most importantly, we should think about what is the average cost for an outplaced special education students. And currently it's about $70,000. And that does include the transportation cost. You compare that to the average teacher salary in Andover, which is also roughly about $70,000. So think, 1 outplaced student equals 1 teacher in the school district. Very interesting.
And when you say an outplaced student and the district maybe doesn't agree with the parents of the student on whether that student should be outplaced, what would be included in the process of outplacing that student or making that decision? Usually
when that type of a situation occurs, the matter is handled by the Bureau of Special Ed Appeals up in Boston, and both sides have to retain the lawyers. The lawyers cost a lot of money. The actual court situation itself also gets into taking time off from work and preparing your case. So it does go beyond the $70,000 if you think about the entire process of an outplacement.
Right, so legal fees on top of that in some cases. Mr. Parker?
One of the experiences that I had prior to being in the social studies department is I worked in a program that used to be here at the school called the Mixed Program. And we worked with kids that had some significant problems in being in the mainstream class. Not necessarily that that they were unable or incapable of doing the work, but they emotionally couldn't be in the regular classes. When we had that program, we had up to 19 students in the class. There were a couple of times over the course of the years that I helped run that program where we went out and brought kids back from outplacement. At this point, my understanding is there's 57 or so kids at the high school that are outplaced. That program no longer exists here at the high school, and my understanding is that the cost is about $3.5 million. That is the high school cost to have those kids sent out. So I'm not sure why that program was ever disbanded. I left the year before it was closed, and I know that it made a significant difference to the kids we had here at the school. And they were, on many occasions, integrated back into the regular classroom, either part-time or sometimes almost full-time. They'd check in the morning, check in at the end of the day, perhaps have lunch with us, but then they were in other classes, which worked out wonderfully for those kids, and they weren't outside of our school here at Andover High. They weren't outplaced, and it was definitively a huge savings. There were 3 teachers at the end of the program. There were 3 teachers and a part-time social worker. Again, cost between that and just a few kids placed out would be the same. So if we're looking at removing even more teachers now from the special education department, where many of those teachers are able at this point, because of that team teaching model, having those kids in the regular classroom, and you remove those 8 teachers, then you have, number one, more kids who are going to be in standard, what they refer to as standard classes, so they are not receiving kind of that least restrictive environment that they should be having. And my guess is, knowing Andover parents and how pretty articulate and bright they are, that there will be numbers of parents who are going to request that their kids be placed outside because we're not meeting their needs. And I don't know how we'd be able to meet their needs, given the fact that we would lose 8 special education teachers. So the cost, that $3.5 million, $5, $6, $7, $8 million by the time we're done, because we don't have those teachers in place. We don't have the ability to be able to keep those kids here in that least restrictive environment. So it's maybe penny wise and pound foolish getting rid of these 8 teachers. Look at the cost that those kids I had a number of years ago, $3.5 million. I'm not saying that all of those kids could have been contained in that program that I had before, but half of them, I mean, we're talking huge as far as cost and cost savings over time if we kept the teachers that are proposed to be cut. So kind of a surprise to me that they would even propose this.
So it seems illogical. Right.
Completely logical to me, and at the time, as I said, the program I had before, where we had up to 18 or 19 kids, we saved lots of money. We went out a few times. The town asked us, special education downtown asked, can you go out, can you look at kids? We went out, we looked at kids at different programs, we brought kids back at $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 for these outside placements. And that $70,000, $65,000 to $70,000 is a base cost. That's not including transportation. If you look at the transportation budget, it is astronomical. And we're talking that these kids go not to one other school, it's several other schools in several other places around the state.
Anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I worked with Brian in the alternative program for a couple of years as well, and I'm a licensed social worker also, and beyond the monetary cost, of course, is the cost to the child and the family and the community if they can't be educated in their own community, if they can't be surrounded by their peers and their neighbors. That's a huge cost to all of us. And then what about the kids whose parents maybe aren't going to be able to hire a lawyer or don't have an advocate, who don't know how to come in and advocate with the school system or to get what the child needs? That kid is at much greater risk for dropping out of school. These are the kids then that end up without a job, without a diploma, that